All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kim Coble. I'm the Executive Director of the Maryland League of Conservation Voters, and I am thrilled and excited about today's conversation. We are joined today by Secretary Designee Josh Kurtz, who's going to be the Secretary of the Maryland Department of the Environment, Maryland Department of Natural Resources. And I'll come back to Josh in just a minute. Let me get through my homework first. As you know, every week we ask you, how can we help you become empowered and informed advocates? So at the end, we have a survey. If something's come to mind that you'd like to hear about, let us know. Happy to organize it. We've got some kind of fun conversations coming up, but we have room on the calendar to meet with the needs that you guys have. So please let us know what you'd like. As always, put your name in the chat and where you're from so we can keep track of you, and your folks that are attending knows that you're here. And then also, if you have questions for Mr. Kurtz, Secretary Kurtz, put them in the question and answer or chat, and we will pick them up at the end there. So that's the homework. And as I said, I'm really honored to have Josh join us today. In full disclosure, I would call Josh a good friend of mine, as well as the Secretary of Department of Natural Resources. He went through the nominations hearing on Monday night, and I was very proud to represent Maryland LCV in supporting his nomination. We wrote a letter, we attended the hearing, and gave our full endorsement of him as an excellent choice for the Secretary of DNR. I don't want to be disrespectful, but I think I'm going to have to call him Josh during the whole interview.
Please do.
So Josh, thank you for being here, and congratulations also. It's a great honor to have you representing us.
Thanks, Kim. And yeah, it's an honor to sit in this chair and to be able to work with you and the incredible advocates that you have at LCV and we've got across the state. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, me too. I am too. And just a quick background, Josh worked for the Nature Conservancy for a number of years in all different capacity, as well as the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Comes at this job with both academic and professional experience that is perfect for the position. Happy to go through the details if anybody's interested, but trust me, he's the right person for the job. So let me start out with an easy question, but would love to hear it from your perspective. What exactly does the Department of Natural Resources do and cover? And, in some ways it's almost other when it comes to the environment, but let's hear it from you. What's the role of this department?
Yeah, no, thanks, Kim. And I like to think that the DNR covers everything that everybody loves about the environment, right? It's the opportunities that we have to get outdoors, whether it's in our park system, in our forests, our state forests, our wildlife management areas. We do restoration work, right? We're really the restoration muscle for the state. So we're planting trees, we're restoring wetlands, we're working in the aquatic environment too, whether that's in SAVs, aquatic submerged not vehicles. Goodness, what am I doing here? Vegetation. So we really push and move forward our ability to have clean water and clean air and more resilient communities through restoration. We also have our really a lot of science work comes out of our agency. We're in charge of the water quality monitoring stations. We've got scientists that are looking at a wide range of different species that are critical not only to the economy but to our ecology. So we are kind of, I like to think we've got a lot of folks that are out there on the ground, boots on the ground, all across the state doing the work. We also have the Natural Resources Police, so making sure that people are safe when they're out in our environment, enjoying the incredible resources that we have. And I think one of the most important things that we do as a department is we connect people to nature, whether that's in urban communities through urban tree plantings, whether that's in kind of our suburban areas, right? We have several state parks in those areas and land holdings, or whether it's in our rural areas where we've got some of our larger, I'd say some of our really intact environments that we've been able to protect. So I'm a believer that the department really touches everybody in the state and really is a major driver for our clean water, our clean air, and opportunities for recreation.
Speaking of the recreation part, you mentioned this, but the agency oversees the state parks.
Mhm.
And how do you know how many state parks we have?
I believe it's 56.
Yeah,
Still,
it's
so it's and a
far,
wide range of very diverse parks.
right, far more than I ever thought.
Yeah.
Some small, some huge. But during the pandemic, we all came to really appreciate any chance we had to get outdoors to, just be anywhere other than our living room or in front of a Zoom camera. So the parks were really used. And I thought that was a fabulous statement of where people really got renewed energy. And last year, Maryland passed the Great Outdoors Act, giving more money to the state parks. There's also an effort underway to create the Chesapeake National Recreation Area. So there's a lot happening to expand the park program in Maryland. So tell us a little bit about, what exactly your vision is for parks, how you see the state maximizing what we have and the resources that people have access to.
Yeah, I think that's a really big task of ours, and I really appreciate the point you make there about what we learned in the pandemic, right? People love being outside for a wide range of different reasons. And I think that's something we take really seriously. We want to make sure that we are providing opportunities for people that love to fish, that love to hunt, that love to bird watch, that love to whitewater raft, that love to I mean, the list of things that people do in our parks is substantial. And I think we're almost seeing like a lot of innovation in the outdoor recreation space. It's like every week people are coming to us and saying, I want to do this thing in a state park. So it's balancing use of our parks and also the ecological value that they provide. I think everything at the Department of Natural Resources can be kind of summed up as a balance. And I think outdoor recreation is an incredible asset for us from an economic perspective too, a learning perspective, right? Getting people out kind of across the state. So I think we want to make sure that we're really expanding access. A lot of our big parks we talked about are in rural areas and hard for people to reach, right? So we want to make sure, I actually learned this recently from the Chesapeake Bay Commission. Every Marylander is a 10-minute walk from a creek, a river, a stream, the Chesapeake Bay. And we need to make sure that everybody is able to access the benefits. And I think during the pandemic, one thing we really saw was the mental health benefits of being outside. I experienced it myself. We were living in an apartment in downtown Silver Springs, surrounded by concrete, and even just taking the dog for a walk in Rock Creek Park or in a small pocket park in a community was just a kind of like a sigh of relief a little bit. And I think the pandemic, unfortunately, for putting everybody inside, also helped people really reconnect with the being outside and their love of being outside. And it's amazing how many people you talk to who say things like, oh, I picked up fly fishing in my garage during the pandemic. Or I learned to bird watch from sitting outside, sitting in my house and being like, wow, there's a lot of birds in my yard that look really different. What are they? So it really has been a driver and something we're really excited to continue to capitalize. But again, it really, I think, comes back to our ability to provide that access to everybody and make sure it's equitable.
I really appreciate that point because that has to happen. That we just everybody needs to have that access. So let me ask you a little personal question. Do you have a favorite state park or do you have one that you really enjoy going to?
So that's I feel like they're like all your children, right? You can't pick a favorite. So it's pretty hard. I have spent a lot of times in our state parks over the course of my life. One of the things that drew me into this work, during the pandemic, the park we went to the most, I won't say this is the park that maybe is our favorite, but the park we went to the most was Tuckahoe. Great campground, really nice walking trails. I think we really it was pretty close to our house, but far enough away that it felt like a vacation. So Tuckahoe was one we visited a fair amount during when we were kind of a little bit, pent up in the pandemic, but it's hard. It's really hard to pick, right? You've got so much diversity. Assateague is phenomenal, a really unique experience. And then you've got big expanses of forest in the Green Ridge State Forests. It's really, and then Patapsco, so much the proximity to the city. I mean, I think it's almost like the flavor of ice cream, right? Sometimes you're in the mood for chocolate, sometimes you're in the mood for vanilla, a little rocky road. I think our park system kind of provides that.
And for those members that are on, I highly encourage you to go to the DNR website. They've got a great website about the state parks. You can kind of see what the personality is and what the accessibility is, what they have to offer. So if you haven't explored the state parks, go for it. You can get an annual pass and get access to all of them for a really reasonable fees. So let me shift gears a little bit. I know this is an issue that you and I have talked about before, but I want to talk about fisheries.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's a big issue for Maryland, given the Chesapeake Bay and given our fresh water. But tell me a little bit, and it's controversial, right? There's a lot of history, a lot of culture around our fisheries and the community. But tell me from your perspective, what does a successful wild fishery look like for Maryland?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a successful for wild fishery for Maryland, regardless of species, is one that is sustainable, one that we're continually building abundance for the species, for the ecological value and for the economic value, at the department, as well as the cultural value, as you said. The department, we kind of have this charge of managing our natural resources for ecology, economy, and social value. And so whenever we're making decisions, whether that be regulating the fishery, or whether that means restoring a forest, or whatever it might be, we're trying to make sure that we're striking that balance. I think there are a few, particularly worrisome issues in the fishery space that I think really unify people, and they're really around invasive species right now. We're seeing this huge emergence, and have for a while, of things like blue catfish, of snakehead, flathead catfish. And being able to work together, I think the waterman community, the conservation environmental community, academia, our processors, right? There's just this huge ecosystem of folks that I think working together, we can have good outcomes that, again, protect that water quality and the economic opportunities that they provide. And I think as a state, that's really how we've strived to work on fisheries management, and something that we'll want to just continue to grow. I think an important part of any management regime too is making sure that we're grounded in the best available data, right? Mm-hmm. Making sure that we have the data, we're staying on top of new processes, maybe new technology to help us be accurate with our understanding of what our populations look like, so that we can make sure that we're maximizing that benefit for again, all three of those pieces, right? The cultural, the ecological, and the economic.
Yeah, it's such an important part of who we are, right? The whole definition of Maryland is really based on the history and the waterways and the systems. And I appreciate your sensitivity to it, maintaining that while also protecting the resources that we have. I'm gonna there's a couple of questions I want to hit right now, and I'll come back to some of mine. But Josh and I were on the Maryland Commission for Climate Change, and I guess we'll continue to be on it together. You within a new role, and so this question is really important. And it says, how do you connect the dots between enjoying Maryland's green spaces and protecting them from climate change? So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this is one for me that is really exciting, because our green spaces and our natural processes, right? Our environment is like one of the most critical components to mitigating climate change, to making sure our communities are resilient in the face of the changes that we're already experiencing here in Maryland. We have so many waterways, right? It's one of the as we just talked about, it's one of the defining characteristics of our state. I think a lot of people found their love for being outdoors with our waterways. And the things that we can do to protect our waterways, restoring wetlands, planting trees, green infrastructure in urban areas, are things when we plan and we think about kind of holistically, can also mitigate the impacts of climate change and actually pull carbon out of the air. So I think there's the physical kind of how it can help, and then there's also how we communicate that, how we explain that to people. And I think that goes back to having a really talented group of folks in our Park Service who can really effectively communicate that science. I know it's hard when you think about climate change being this huge global process shift, but it's a lot easier when you talk about it in terms of, increased amount of storms, right? That's something everybody understands. We live here. We saw 2018, 2019, some of these big storm events. So I think it's unfortunately being able to highlight some of the impacts, but also showing us places where we've been successful in doing these restoration kind of practices, and are really demonstrating that a community resilience, or as we see in the mitigation working group, the actual data behind the carbon sequestration.
Yeah. Yeah. Another good question is, how can young people get involved in DNR? And not just, I mean, partly as an employment, but also learning how to take action on environmental issues. And yeah, maybe a little bit about environmental ed that you guys do.
Yeah, there's a wide range. Whether it is working with, being a part of our ranger program, whether that is just going to parks. We do a lot of work at each park with kind of in interpretation, right? Whether it be historical, cultural, environmental, really being on that forefront of STEM education. We work really closely with different, school systems across the state. Actually this coming week, we have our Forest Day poster contest where elementary school students put together posters that explain to us why forests are important, what they do for the environment. And the winners of the poster contest then are able to take trees back to their schools. So, anywhere we can, we're trying to connect with young people. For me, environmental education was really important. Being able to get outside and learn hands-on experiences. So it's also partnering with the organizations that do it really well. We're frankly blessed to be in a state that has the STEM education system that is so well built out in our schools. I mean, obviously, it can always get better, but also the set of partners in the NGO space that are really doing that work. I think that those are some, there's kind of endless growth potential for me anyway in that experience. And I think probably many people on this call, many people I talk to, those experiences, whether they're like outdoor ed when you're in elementary school, and I'm a Montgomery County Public Schools product. So it was really, I think, helpful for me and important for me to get here, to have those opportunities when I was younger, and to feel connected to the resources that we have.
Yeah, it's there's so many opportunities for young people. I probably, like a lot of you, get calls often from young folks wanting to get involved in this field. So internships through the agency and mentorships opportunities. So I encourage everybody to look at the website and see what's available there. There's a series of questions about staffing. So I'm just going to hit this head on.
Yep.
Over the last 8 years, staffing of agencies was not a priority. There was not the resources, there was not the hiring capacity, and there was a limitation. These are my words, a limitation on what those staff could provide to the General Assembly members and whatnot. So, new governor, new secretary, tell us a little bit about what's going to happen with the staff at DNR, about the hiring capacity, and how you see the skills and talents of our state employees being able to be utilized.
Yeah, I think that, the more I walk around here, the more I get to know the staff. And I was lucky to know some of them before I came, the more I recognize that, maybe the most important thing for our natural resources is the people that work in the department. It's an incredibly motivated, dedicated, passionate group of people who are drivers of cutting edge science. They work very well with the university systems. And what we want is a lot more of that. We want our employees to be empowered to talk to stakeholders, to work with whoever that might be who has a question for the department, to talk to legislators. And we also recognize that the mission of the department is massive. And in order to meet that mission, that mandate, to hold in trust, the natural resources for all Marylanders, we're going to need to continue to grow our staff to make sure that we can do that effectively. Whether that's growing our science capacity, growing our ability to interact with folks out in the field. We talked about the Park Service. We're constantly expanding our land holdings through program open space and some of our land protection programs, which are national models for how we can provide sustainable resources for the future. But in order to provide those resources successfully, you have to have the people to be able to do that too. So that is a critical component, I think, and will be a critical component for our success in managing our resources, is making sure that we're investing in and empowering our people.
And do you think there's going to be funds available to hire more staff?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we have
Okay.
vacant pins right now. We are actively and heavily recruiting in many spaces. Please check our website. But across pretty much every and all departments, we are actively recruiting and hiring.
Awesome. That's great. Let me turn to the Chesapeake Bay. Both Josh and I are had spent time at the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and it's near, the resource itself is near and dear to our hearts. Recently, it was determined that the goals were not going to be met by 2025, and that we needed to pause things and work to for a later date to meet the goals. So, you know, that's a hard pill to swallow as a Marylander. So talk to us a little bit about your vision for this work. Where are we going? How do we get to where we need to be? And yeah.
Yeah, I think we have an incredible opportunity, right? What we are doing, and I think sometimes we lose sight of this, is one of the largest restoration approaches ever undertaken on this planet. We are looking to restore an incredibly large ecosystem, one that is frankly difficult to restore because of some of the things that make it so great, right? It's very shallow, it's expansive. So I think recognizing that and appreciating how much work has gone into it and how hard we've worked to get to where we are, and recognizing that we do have further to go. And I think when we think about what that continued effort looks like, it really is making sure that when we're working on restoration, it kind of gets back to that, what we were saying about climate change, right? That there are nexuses for all of the work that we're doing on clean water. And I think in order for us to continue to build the constituency, the support, grow the number of people that care about the restoration, we want to continue to focus on how are we delivering that work? You know, how are we working with local governments to solve other problems when we're doing restoration practices that lead to clean water? I think it's also internally making sure that all of our agencies that are working on bay restoration are working together and aligning some of the really big and ambitious goals of this administration that go beyond what we traditionally think is environmental work, right? How does bay restoration play a role in ending childhood poverty? We should be asking ourselves these questions, because the bay it's a massive system that is intrinsically linked to every piece of our lives. We should be thinking about the restoration in that same kind of mindset. So I think it's equal parts building on what we've done, focusing in on all of these incredible ecosystem services that come out of the work that we do, and maximizing all of the resources that we can put into that, and bringing more people to the table to work on it, whether that's NGOs, partners, the university system. It's continuing to grow I would say the coalition of the willing, if you will, the resource capacity, the people that care, because again, it's one of the most ambitious restoration efforts ever undertaken.
Yeah. Let me go back to a point you just made, that the connection between the bay and restoring the bay is really integrated into everything, all the other goals that the state has, and you use child poverty as an example. Can you expand a little bit on that? How do you, if your new boss, Governor Moore, said, you know, Josh, I want to plan on how we can link the bay restoration to improving our statistics around child poverty, what kind of, where would you start? What would it look like?
Yeah, and I think that we're well positioned as an agency to do that, because we consider the economic outputs of our natural resources, and because there's been so much innovation in our restoration economy, right? We've talked about that as a term for a very long time, but the opportunity for restoring our waterways, our forests, our sea level, or our wetlands to help us with different like flooding issues and things like that. There's an economy that we can continue to build out there. And I think some of the tools like the Conservation Finance Act are going to be able to really help us there. So it's how do we expand some of that economic capacity from our natural resources more equitably across the state? You know, whether that is in Somerset County, in Baltimore City, in Garrett County, we need to be thinking about the opportunities that each one of these localities and our natural resources can provide in these localities, and making sure that we're supporting those economic development goals. So I think there's a lot of ways, and it kind of gets back to that linking up with our sister agencies and across the cabinet, and making sure that we are, we're coordinating, we're collaborating pretty much, constantly, really, so that we can contribute to all of the things that, we as Marylanders want to see achieved.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I fully support that. I know there's lots of questions coming in, and I'm trying to manage these. They're great. Yeah, let me you mentioned the thing about partnerships, and what is your vision, and do you see an increase ability to partner with NGOs and citizen groups and industry groups and recreational partners, etc.? So how do you see folks outside the agency working with those inside the agency?
Yeah, I think we have some incredible tools already in the toolbox, right? The Chesapeake and Atlantic Coastal Bays Trust Fund of 2010 is a funding source that goes to projects that improve water quality. We've gotten a lot more authority to be able to spend that in ways that maximize benefits, but the main driver of how we spend that money is partnerships. So we can continue to, in expanding how we and thinking about how we spend that money, grow those partnerships. The university systems that we have in this state are world-class. We partner in several spaces already, but I think it's just continuing to make to include more and more of those school systems, working with the community colleges as well. We've got we've done things well in the past. I think we can learn from them kind of as pilots, build on what's been successful. And I think when you are doing good work that's based in partnership, you attract more people and you attract more resources, right? We have opportunities right now with so many federal funds and grants coming into our state, making sure that we've kind of got these pathways, these channels for the funding to flow through existing partnerships, through existing ways that we work in the department with local governments, with NGOs, with community groups, and making sure that we're accessible to groups that maybe haven't had that relationship with us. It can't be, let's take the pots of money to the same groups over and over again. It needs to be, let's make sure it's accessible to everyone, and that as we're developing projects and partnerships, we're also being proactive about it. So if we're working in Prince George's County and we're working with a community association, well, who else is around there? What other groups have capacity, have resources, have relationships? Because I think a lot of this work is about relationships and building trust, especially when you're delivering on things that should be benefiting local communities, and we are emphasizing that. So I think there's I know that we can't get this done by ourselves, and so we have to partner to be successful. And it really is, I think, the underpinning to all of our success, and that those partnerships kind of cut across all different spectrums and industries. And that's how, again, we get to these big goals, which we've set for ourselves in the climate space, in the restoration space, in the water quality space. It's going to take as many people who we can just, jump on the bus with us and help us power it forward.
Well, thank you. I think it's really evident why Maryland League of Conservation voters came out in such strong support of Josh's nomination, and we really applaud Governor Moore for selecting him. One of the things that came up during his nomination hearing was allowed him to emphasize the point of balance, that not only balance of perspectives, but what is the science saying? How do we root our decisions in making sure that there's balance across the board? So I want to just point that out, because I believe that that's really an important part of how we move forward collectively, both with the sensitivity to everybody's needs as well as how we approach those things. We are out of time. That I told you it would go really fast.
Really quickly, yeah.
And I have to say, for those of you calling in, your questions are great, and we'll go ahead and make sure that Josh gets those. And if he has an opportunity to respond in another way, he will. But Thank you. It's an honor to have you here. We couldn't be more thrilled to have you as secretary, and we look forward to working with you. And thanks for joining us today for Friday Digest. Stay on, fill out the survey so we can meet your needs. Next week, we have Chairman Feldman from the Senate Committee, Environment, Education, and Energy Committee, which is a newly formed committee on. Going to be talking to him about the issues that are coming in front of his committee and learn a little bit more about him. So join us for that. Everybody have a great weekend. Thank you. Thank you, Josh. Take care now.
Thank you, Kim. Take care, everyone.